Don't be a hero, mate. You look after your mates, and your mates will always look after you. Yeah, cheers.
Just like Shackleton, your mates will look after you.
That's right.
That's how it goes.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate. Just don't get lost in the Arctic Circle. Man, I could have talked about that segment. I could have talked about a lot of our segments today a lot longer because they were all very interesting, but we're going to toss one more at you. This is the segment where we do Aussie news. We go down to the land down under, and we check in with our Aussie friends down there. This week, we're going to talk about a rare prototype Holden VH Commodore sells for $108,000 at auction.
What's that? Is that an old computer?
It's an old car.
Oh, the Commodore 64.
So it's an old car. The reason why I thought this was really interesting, I learned a couple things. Like it put a lot of perspective that Australia makes like their own cars. Not every country is an importer, and I thought it just opened my eyes to the way that vehicles work. So Holden was a car company, an Australian car company. I think they were owned by General Motors or eventually bought by General Motors, but they created all these kind of prototype cars. If you look at the model that they found, the VH Commodore, it's kind of an unassuming car. And it's got an strikes me as like an Australian kind of car because it's like tan. It's like beige. And it just looks like it's straight out of the 60s because it is. This car was, actually the 80s, pardon me, but it's straight out of the 80s because it is.
That's a beaut.
It is kind of a cool looking car. So the idea was that this was a prototype vehicle that people, I think, were teaching car design based off of. And they just rolled it into this teaching facility, must have thought about it, and then just rolled it into storage because they had never driven the car before.
Really?
So this is like a 40-year-old car.
Right off the factory line.
Literally right off the factory line. They just covered it up and it had been sitting there. So like it was in pristine condition. It was just funny how people found it. The guy who was talking about the car was just so thrilled about it. And I think it just goes to show it's a cool idea that you never know that when that thing that you have is going to turn into that thing that people want. And apparently with COVID, antique and collectible cars, classic cars, the sales of these have just increased because people get such a kick out of finding and buying old cars that like these auction houses are seeing massive increases in the amount of transactions that are happening there. So you never know. When that thing you covered up in your garage, that old Commodore, that old VH Commodore, might turn into a nice big fat check.
Dang. That is freaking crazy.
Yeah, but it is a pretty car. The logo's cool. It's like a lion.
Yeah. Tigers, bears.
Bears.
Oh my.
Yeah, Holden's a cool company. They actually, they made some of the prettiest cars too. We had a Pontiac because you said it was owned by GM.
Yeah.
At one point, Holden made a V8 car. I forget what the Holdens called it, but it was actually, I think it was the Pontiac 500. And I mean, it was like one of the fastest cars you could buy here, like off the factory floor at one point. They're a cool company.
Makes a lot of sense because they got so much flat space out there. They probably just drove it right out and just.
Yeah. We need to get that in the Cleveland Automobile Museum.
Maybe that's who bought it.
Maybe.
Over there in the Western Reserve Museum.
Yeah. That's a cool place to walk through.
Yeah, those cars are beautiful.
Yeah.
So there you go. Holden VH Commodore sells for $108K at auction. 1981 prototype. Beauty.